Hello and welcome to my little trip down road testing memory lane. Another Q&A video today. Thanks again for all your really cool comments and questions. So let's crack straight on with the first one. And this is two on the same subjects actually. This is from GingerPunk2. Thanks very much for your question. Mr. Neevesy, love these vids, most enjoyable and always learn a lot from each one. So thanks for taking the time to do them. No problem. I have a follow-up question on the ABS question from the last video. I'm a relatively new track rider, riding road bikes for 15 years or so, having worked up from a Yamaha R7 from a Ninja 400, which allowed me to break through some personal riding barriers. I'm now wondering after your video if I should perform an ABS delete on the R7. It's a strictly track machine for me and will be modified accordingly, etc. Or is it worth keeping on for a period of time as I'm still developing my track skills? As I say, I'm new to track riding this year and only been on track 6 times. I'm just thinking about building up habits one way or another, etc. Better for me to learn braking without it on track. I'm not very fast and still very green, but I like to set good habits early if I can. And then the next comment was from Peter Vizzy, 5369. Thanks for your question. And again, this is talking about the same comment. I was talking about ABS on an MT-09 that some lucky fellow was going to take around Laguna Seca. And this comment says, don't forget it's his first track day. It's quite unlikely anyone will brake that hard on their first track day that ABS is going to make them crash. Don't need to scare people. Probably it would rather save a situation or two and now let all those comments come who say they were the new Rossi on their first track day. Right, so ABS on motorcycles, it's there as a safety device for the road, and that is it basically. If manufacturers could, through Euro 5 laws, they would disable the ABS for track and racing, because really there's no benefit to having ABS on a racetrack. Maybe in the wet, but generally not. So ABS obviously is a no-brainer on the road. It will save you bacon when you panic brake, so it will save the front wheel locking up, and it will save a massive endo as well if you slam on the brakes. And kind of in very simple terms, ABS works. It reads the wheel speeds of the bike, the front and rear wheel speeds, and if it senses the wheels locking up or going at different speeds under deceleration, then it will basically let go of the brakes on your behalf and then reapply them. And if it still sees the wheels are locked or there's still a danger, it will keep letting go, putting them back on, letting them go, putting them back on. Early ABS systems, you could really feel that pumping through the lever. But today's ABS with IMUs and all the sensors that are all around the bikes are much smoother. Here's the problem with ABS on track. ABS on track per se won't make you crash. In fact, it's probably impossible to crash more or less with cornering ABS. You can brake as hard as you want and you'll never lock the front wheel. You'll never endo. And even if you trail the brakes up into the hairpins or into corners, it's very unlikely you'll lose the front with good cornering ABS. So in that way, it's a safety aid. But what ABS does sometimes when you brake hard is lengthen your braking distances, because it's letting on and off. And that might be okay 9 times out of 10. But for that time where you panic brake, like you leave your braking a little bit too late, it might cause you to run off the track. Or if you're in a gaggle of riders and you need to stop quick, it might not stop you before you hit a rider in front. Hard braking isn't really necessarily the reserve of fast riders. You know, some tracks, some corners, a faster rider's not braking as hard as a slower rider. So the problem with ABS on track is, I mean, the way it activates so soon compared to the road is when you're hard braking on the track, It's not that you're locking the front wheel up, it's that the rear wheel is starting to lose traction and it'll start to go slower than the front. And as soon as it starts to go slower than the front, the bike gets in a panic and it lets the brake off. And that happens with cornering ABS as well. As you start to trail brake and the tyres start to go at different speeds, then the brakes let off. So yeah, by all means, take an ABS bike on track. It's not inherently dangerous if you just make sure you keep your kind of braking distances within the limits of the brakes, really. You know, if you're absolutely an experienced rider and you're doing hot laps, all ABS really is going to do is get in the way and extend those braking distances. Some bikes get around that by having race modes. Some BMWs and Ducatis and Aprilias, Triumphs, where they disconnect the ABS sensor and then you don't have that problem anymore. And you can more or less brake as hard as you want, you know, and even endo the bike with ABS. Some bikes won't let you do that because of the internal IMU. It knows it's leaning over too far and it'll let the brake off. But something like a modern generation Ducati Panigale or Street Fighter, you can brake absolutely as hard as you want and you'll get zero ABS intervention. Whereas if you were to take an MT-07 on the track or a Honda Hornet or something like that, you're going to get a lot of intervention. And going back to the first question about Ginger Punk 2 doing track only on an R7. Well, we tested an R7 around a racetrack last year at MCN in a little middleweight supersport test, and the brakes were really bad for that reason. You know, hard braking was almost impossible because the ABS would just keep intruding. So if you're only going to ride the R7 on track, definitely find a way of getting rid of the ABS. It's just a no-brainer, more of a safety thing if you want to go fast. You know, if you want to just dip your toes into track days and not go bonkers, fine, take an ABS bike. But be aware that it is a thing. If that ABS intrudes, it's going to extend your braking zones. So really interesting question. I can't see things changing soon. You know, manufacturers may be putting even more of a straitjacket in the future and they won't be allowed to do anything to their ABS. But yeah, it's a thing at the moment, and you know, you won't find any pure track bikes or pure race bikes with ABS unless it's a Ducati or a BMW with a race kit. I actually raced with ABS for a few years on my BMW, but it had a racing ABS system that was designed to let you brake absolutely as hard as you can. So thanks very much for the questions. That's the ABS sorted. And this next one's from John Smith. Thanks for your question, John. If I only had a budget of £3,000 tops, is the older 650 Daytona Triumph still a good option? Or is it far below what the 675 was? Cheers. Well, the 675 raised the bar, the Supersport bar, when it came out in 2006. Not only compared to the old 650 Daytona, but compared to all the other 600s at the time. Completely different chassis, much more performance orientated engine. We rode the Daytona 650 a few times in 600 group test. To be honest, it was always towards the back. It was a little bit kind of porky, a little bit underpowered, a little bit snatchy compared to its rivals. But for £3,000, I think you can only start getting Daytona's 675s for like 4 and above. So yeah, if you've got a £3,000 budget, I think a 650 Daytona has actually come of age a little bit. If you're not after absolute cutting edge supersport performance, why not? You know, and it's a lovely looking bike. It's kind of a historic bike, really, isn't it? Because those original Daytonas were the first time Triumph came back into the Supersport 600 kind of market. So yeah, I say go for it. Dynamically, it's not as good as a 675, but it's still a decent bike. But £3,000 will also buy you the sort of and we've spoken about it before with the ZX6R B1H, and the original CBR 600RR, that kind of class of 2003 and 2004, you can find bikes like the GSX-R 600, that Honda, that Kawasaki, the Yamaha R6. You know, you can get one for about $3,000, and they will be better than the 650 Daytona. So that's something worth considering, those 4 cylinders. But otherwise, you know, if you find a good Daytona that's been well looked after, you know, it's a bit, you'd stand out in a crowd, put it that way. You know, everyone's got a 675, everyone's got a GSX-R 600, but bikes like that, I think are really, really cool. So yeah, let me know how you get on. But thanks very much, John. Next question from 100 Cups Columbia. Thanks for your question. Can't think that we've ever seen you on a dirt bike. If not, why not? Well, we're testing more and more off-roaders really nowadays at MCN, now that adventure bikes are so popular. We test adventure bikes mainly on the road because that's mainly what people use them for. But at adventure bike launches, at new bike launches, there's quite often anything from a medium to quite heavy duty off-road element. And I generally don't volunteer myself for those kind of more hardcore off-road launches, because they're pretty gnarly actually, you know, and a lot of people I know have been to them say they're quite tough going. Sometimes we do tests of enduro bikes and motocross bikes, but not very often. I mean, the truth is I'm rubbish off-road. I mean, that's the underlying reason I don't do so much. I really enjoy it. I've done enduro hare and hounds races before. I've had a WR250, really loved it. But the problems are kind of twofold for me. Number one, I think to be good off-road you need to do it from when you're really young, and I really only got into it really late. So, you know, the very fact that you've got to do everything on a bike opposite to how you'd ride a normal bike, your body position and everything like that, and the fact that you can't do it on your own. I don't really sort of know anyone that lives near me that have got off-roaders I could kind of go out with. So I don't get much practice. You know, when I do go off-road or do off-road schools or get off-road tuition, I really enjoy it. And kind of after a day's riding, I'm kind of there or thereabouts. But then it might be another year till I ride off-road again, and all that knowledge kind of goes out the window. But I enjoy watching off-road stuff. I mean, I've become hooked on Billy Bolt's YouTube videos. They're absolutely fantastic. Tommy Searles, and you know, it's actually quite nice for me to just enjoy the riding skill of someone else instead of getting frustrated that I can't do it. I kind of just appreciate it for what it is. But yeah, I'd like to do more off-road. You know, maybe one day I'll buy myself another enduro bike and do some more off-roading. I like flat track. The Champions Flat Track School isn't that far from where I live, the Peterborough School, and that's a nice kind of hybrid between road riding and off-roading. There's no jumps, there's no massive ruts. It's basically just a racetrack that's made of dirt, and that you ride little bikes around and slide them around, which are really good fun. So yeah, I like dirt bikes. I just wish I was a bit better at them. But thanks very much for your question. Next one. From Marv2820, this Marv says, interesting comments about middleweight bikes. Just considering one myself to ride around the Almeria roads where you do quite a few launches rather than my Fireblade. Great roads. As you know these roads, I was wondering which you would choose. I'm looking at new so I can keep it over there without the hassle of an MOT for 3 years. Considering the Gas Husqvarna KTM Supermoto or the Aprilia 660-210 factory. I do like the Fantic Caballero 500 that I know you like. Great bike, but not sure if it'd be a bit underpowered for the mountain roads. Might have been okay with the 700 version, but it doesn't seem to be coming and seems overpriced now, given they originally said it was going to be $1,000 less, and here by spring 23. Well, interesting question. So yeah, those roads around Almeria are just fantastic. I mean, all the mountain roads, all the flip-flops, all the roads that run alongside the sea, just heavenly. Some of the best roads in the world down there. And yeah, they're probably super bikes go well around there, but they're probably a little bit too small for super bikes. And I'd say they're probably a little bit too big, definitely for a Fantic Caballero 500. I feel a bit lost through those roads. And even a Supermoto probably be a bit small from them, because those roads are so long. I think after about half an hour on a Supermoto, you might want to turn around and go home, even though they're amazing fun. And the Aprilia 660 Tuono factory, great bike, but maybe a little bit underpowered. I think the perfect bikes for you would be the middleweight nakeds, which are the MT-09, the Monster, the KTM Duke 890, or what am I missing? Yamaha Triumph Street Triple. Those bikes, really. Am I missing any others? No Hondas, Suzukis, Kawasaki's? No. So those bikes are kind of like the modern day super sport bikes, really. They kind of give you all the fun of a super sport bike on the road. You know, they're more than powerful enough. They're all pretty characterful. They all handle beautifully. But unlike old super sport bikes, which were race reps, these kind of super sport bikes are naked. So you've got a lot of room to move around. You can ride them distance in comfort. You don't have to ride them flat out to have fun. You can ride them slowly down the shops. And of course, the special versions of those are better still. So the Duke 890R, the MT-09 SP, the Street Triple 765 RS, the Monster SP, all fantastic bikes. And yeah, to be honest, if I was living in that neck of the woods, I think they're the bikes I would have for the most fun. Even though I love super nakeds, I think you'd have a much bigger smile on your face on those kind of middleweights. And in fact, I might have mentioned this before, you know, in the UK, where we're all quite obsessed with just having big bikes and you know, big, powerful, impressive machines. In Europe, where people aren't as fussed about keeping up with the Joneses, they buy the bikes that are good for them. And I remember one Saturday morning we were testing in Mount Etna in Sicily, and normally when we test, we always test in the week, wherever it is. We never really encounter any other riders, very, very few. But of course, at weekends is when everyone goes out. So we were actually doing some tyre testing up and down Etna, and the place was just flooded with motorcycles. And all the locals were treating these stretches of road on Etna like a racetrack. They were timing themselves. And full leathers, lids, it was like, reminded me of the old Box Hill days. It was fantastic. And most of them had 890 Dukes and MT-09s and those kind of bikes. There were a few super bikes, there was a few Street Fighter super bikes, but generally those middleweights really hit the sweet spot. So that is what I would recommend. So thanks very much for your question. Next, from Archie Meaden I. Thanks for your question. Hi Neezy, are there any Harley Davidsons you enjoy riding? I live in Japan and have an XR1200, which I've seen you review back in the day. It handles very well and is a raw crude biking experience. I've always been a sports bike fan, but in a similar way to you wanting to ride a scooter on a sunny day, a Harley can be a nice experience just for the sake of riding. Good question. Harley Davidsons. So in my old life, before I've joined MCM and I just love sports bikes, I probably wouldn't be seen dead on one. But now that I'm more worldly wise and open to more things in my life and have to ride lots of different bikes for my job, I think Harleys in the right environment are great. There's kind of three things that stick out for me really with Harleys. Number one are the traditional cruisers. I mean, I've had some of the best rides, most memorable rides on like Harley 883 Sportsters and 1200 Sportsters, because they actually handle pretty well. relatively, you know, as long as you know how to ride them and finesse them a little bit through some great roads. So I've had a lot of fun on them. It's fun just to ride a big fully dressed cruiser, you know, slowly distance with the stereo going. That's really cool. But the two kind of standout experiences for me are the Livewire is fantastic. You know, put aside the debate about whether electric is better than petrol, you know, and how you're going to charge the thing up and how much they cost and all of that. But to actually ride, the Livewire is really nice. The acceleration is phenomenal. You know, I think it's restricted to 115 or 112 or something like that. But from 0 to top speed, it's just one. Oof. And because there's no brake for gear changes, because it's just one gear, the acceleration feels more relentless than a superbike. And in actual fact, makes you feel a little bit sick. It's just like a tube train on acid. It's just, so that was really good. The handling, well, the tyres, to be honest, that it was on when I rode one weren't very good, so you had to be a little bit careful. But it's just so smooth. You know, it's ironically the smoothest, best performing Harley, in my opinion, which is ironic given that it's electric and they're known for their big V twins. But, you know, the smoothness is beautiful. When you ride a nice smooth bike, it's just, you know, and a smooth heavy bike, ironically, is a really nice experience on the road. So I really like the Livewire, and like you with your XR1200, I've had a bit of experience on those bikes as well. We rode them back in the day. We rode a really nice Harris special XR1200, which replicated the race bikes in the One Make series, which were really cool. And I got to race in the One Make series as well. I did a guest ride, a Brands Hatch GP in, I've got it written down there. When did I do that? 2011. So quite often we get offered, or we did do, not so much now, guest rides in One Make championships. And I did this Harley ride, and I had the #1 bike, which is pretty cool. And the bike just looked fantastic, really, really nice, like an American flat tracker. And didn't do too bad on it. I ended up finishing 7th in the race. Like I say, it was the only time I'd ever ridden it. Pretty close to 6th. To begin with, is a bit of a baptism of fire. What was the stats on it? So it was 95 bhp, which isn't a lot, is it? 230 kilos. So yeah, what did I end up doing on it? A 141 round Brands GP, which was not too bad on a bike like that. So obviously it hasn't got a lot of power, but it's got a lot of weight. And when I first got on it, I was doing a lot of racing then, you know, on super bikes and stuff like that, club racing. It just felt, I didn't know what to do with it. You know, if it had been a track day, I would have just ridden it around and been scared of it, because you get to a point with those things where they used to get in a real wobble. And in a track day scenario, I would have got to that wobble and thought, no, let's park it. But because I knew I had to go faster and everyone else was going faster, I just had to hang on and see what the wobble would do. And the wobble kind of happened. It got to the edge of violence, and as you went faster, it started to calm down a little bit. And then as you slowed down on the brakes, it made the chassis taut enough not to wobble anymore, but then it would wobble, you know, in a certain speed range when you were on the throttle, which you just had to grit your teeth and close your eyes and get through. And once you sort of get through that, the bike wasn't that bad. I mean, it was, you always knew that if you fell off that thing and it came and found you in a gravel trap, it wouldn't end well. But, you know, it was good, and it was a really nice experience. Quite often with guest rides, I might have spoken about it before, I always call it the curse of the guest ride, because the guest bikes generally are bikes which are unloved between rounds, generally bikes that haven't got the latest and greatest settings that all the other bikes in the championship have evolved through, and generally you're given the bike to run, and you know the organisers walk away, so you're left to figure out how things come apart, what the settings should be, and all the rest of it. So you're on the back foot all the time, so you're on a hide into nothing really. But for this guest ride, the bike was immaculately prepared. I had a mechanic that was just on the bike full time, that knew the bike inside out, did everything and all the changes I asked him to. And it was ironically, it was a Harley race, but it was a really, really good experience. I really enjoyed it. And I saw the race on Dan Sutherland from MCN. Got to ride one at Cadwell recently, and he dug out the race, the BSB race, and sent me a link, and it was brought back some old fantastic memories. So Harleys, yes, I definitely like them. Thanks very much for your question. Next is from, where are we? Another two after this, if you're still hanging on in there. From user JI8QM8D17K. Thanks for your question. Top lad. Listen to the man, makes sense on bikes. I've got a challenge for you MCM boys. How about trying the bike riding camera boys that do the Tour de France? Why don't you boys go and ask how they do it? Have a go with a bloke on the back sitting backwards with a big camera. See what it's like to ride in this circus. See what they do to their bikes, ballast, gearing. Bet it's not an easy job. Spending 8 hours in the saddle riding with those cycles up and down mountains. There's a challenge for you boys. Well, thanks very much for your question. Funny you should say that. We've done something very similar. So in 2019, I think, we did a stage of the Giro d'Italia from the east coast of Italy, sort of down past Ancona, all the way through to Rome. So it was a stage of the Giro d'Italia cycle race, which is one of the big three, isn't it? There's the Spanish one and the Tour de France. And the idea, it was organised by Yamaha, who were providing a lot of the camera bikes for the race, FJRs I think, and Nikens, the new Niken that came out, might have been 2018, can't remember, the three-wheeler. So the idea was for them to promote the Niken. You know, we'd already done the launch, we'd already ridden it a lot of the times. Obviously they were keen to keep it in the public eye, so they invited a bunch of journalists out to Italy to ride the Niken. So we stayed in a hotel on the east coast of Italy with some of the cycling teams. I've never been near a cycle race before, and an event of that magnitude is like a MotoGP race for cycling, obviously. Really interesting being around, the service trucks, servicing the bikes and everything. You suddenly get the realization that this is very, very serious. And the fact that Yamaha had told us that we're not riding with the bikes, we're riding further up the road with the Caravana, as it's called. So you've got this circus. They close the roads down completely on the stage, obviously, and they send all the police cars out and all the vehicles and stuff, and they send this Caravana out, which is like a big circus basically. So it's a lot of the team trucks and the team vehicles with loud music blaring, them giving out t-shirts and memorabilia and stuff like that. And we were kind of tacked on to the end of the Caravana, and we were probably about an hour in front of the actual cycle race, and seeing all those cyclists and everything and seeing how serious it was, I'm glad I was nowhere near them, because that's a big responsibility not to get in their way. So in any event, this riding with the Caravana was amazing. We didn't have to stick with the Caravana. We ended up being kind of in a bit of a no man's land between Caravana and the cycle race. And what that meant was that we had basically, I think it was over 100 miles, like a TT course, completely to ourselves. The roads are completely closed. And we were going through, there's police cars blocking the roads. There was crowds waving at us as we were going along. It was a really surreal experience and really enjoyable on the Niken. And in some of the towns, some of the cobbled streets, you can see how much of an advantage a Niken would be with its extra grip from the front wheels. And when you watch cycle races and they're over cobbles or they're going downhill mountain bends, I think you'd want to be on a Niken as a camera bike. It would be much safer. It would have half a chance of keeping up with the cyclists who are not slow. And then we got to the end and saw the finish of the race, and seeing the speed the cyclists go at. If you've never seen a cycle race, professional cycle race before, it's just unbelievable how fast they go. So yeah, in a nutshell, I was very pleased not to be anywhere near the cycles, but had an amazing experience on that event. So yeah, I think we've done that in answer to your question, but just not that close to the bikes, because I think you'd need a lot of training and someone to have a lot of trust in you to ride so close to them. So, but great question. Thanks very much. This is the penultimate one from Mulkey72. Loving the Q&A and trip down memory lane uploads. Keep them coming, no problem. After a 5-year break from riding sports thousands, I'm currently trying to decide on whether to buy a Generation 3 S1000RR or a 2018 GSX-R1000R. Both are great bikes, but I've heard rumours of poor reliability on the BMW and a couple of reports of sketchy handling on the GSX-R at high speed. What's your experience, knowledge in this, please, and what would be your choice? Thanks for the question. Well, we've had a lot of experience on both, with MCN doing lots and lots of group tests with those two bikes. I've raced the S1000RR since 2010, so I know what makes those tick. Had a 2019 S1000RR as a long-termer, and a 2018 GSX-R as well. Was that 2018, 2017? Must have been 18. But anyway, in answer to your question, if you've had a layoff, five-year layoff from riding sports thousands, I suppose the GSX-R is going to be the more familiar one to you, to the bikes you would have ridden in the past. I'm assuming you've ridden Japanese 1000cc sports bikes before, and the GSX-R1000 really, although it's more refined, doesn't feel a world away different to a K5 GSX-R1000. It's just a little bit faster, a little bit more refined, a bit more stable, a bit better electronics, but fundamentally it feels like the same bike. And the BMW, if you haven't ridden one already, is kind of another level again in terms of performance and technology and stuff like that. So in terms of living with the bikes and being concerned about reliability, I don't think you've got an inherent problem with either of those two bikes. There's rumours of all sorts of bikes breaking down on forums and whatever, and you don't know the full story with those. BMW do have some reliability problems sometimes, but I think if you find one with a full service history and you can see it's been looked after, I don't see you'll have any problem with it. The Suzuki, I can't remember any inherent handling problems with it at high speed. Always found it very stable. The only problems I found on mine and in tests were the brakes, really. They were quite prone to fade, which is an old GSX-R trait, isn't it? And like I said right at the beginning, the ABS was really intrusive on the track, to the point where I've cut track days short because I was worried that if I just carried on pushing my luck with the ABS, then something would happen. So out of those two bikes, I would go for the GSX-R's. Nice because those two bikes actually are probably the most comfortable sports bikes on the road. So that's two big ticks. The GSX-R's got a lot of grunt. It's very, very smooth, but compared to the S1000, it does feel a bit antiquated with its switchgear and its dash. It's kind of got an LCD, kind of like a Casio 70s watch style dash. Doesn't detract from the riding pleasure, but it's just the BMW's got a nicer dash. It's got nicer switchgear, and the thing which would be the deal breaker for me with the BMW is if you found one with cruise control and heated grips, it makes your life so much easier on the road. Stick the cruise control on, you don't have to have sore wrists to sore right wrist. You can shake your wrist off, you can take your hands completely off the bars and just ride along a little bit with no hands, and take the pressure off your arms. And having heated grips is just an amazing thing. From summer days, cold mornings on summer days where you've got thin gloves, to winter riding, heated grips are a no-brainer, and they should be on every bike. So I don't think you'd be disappointed with either, but I would go the BMW route. The S1000's probably got more power, has got more power. It's got better brakes, got better tech, but the GSX-R is still great. It's a little bit softer, that might suit you on the road as well. So, but yeah, let me know how you get on. And finally, from Kooky77, as a relatively new rider, I was finding my confidence growing on a bigger bike over the months after passing my Mod 2 test. A couple of months ago, I was knocked off my bike by a driver suddenly pulling out in front of me. A month later, I was hit by a van who decided to do a U-turn in front of me without warning. I was filtering. Subsequently, I have since been riding so defensively that it almost feels as if the enjoyment of riding has been taken away from me. I now have an NT1100, which I use for touring with the wife, and I'm shortly going to Germany. The weight of responsibility, of course, is magnified when going 2-up. What would your advice be for me to regain my confidence and enjoyment in light of recent events? Well, first of all, I hope you're okay. It's a horrible thing to happen so kind of early in your biking career, but you will get over it. You know, the thing I would say is, when on the road, you've got to assume that everybody is out to get you. If you have a look at a bunch of MCN videos we've done them every year since 2020, and they're called Secrets of a Road Tester, and it talks about safer riding on the road. It talks about, you know, how to avoid accidents, what to look out for, and that's a series of videos I really recommend you should do, because it's all about how, as a professional rider and lots of other professional riders, how they can ride every single day without really getting into any trouble. And, you know, it's more than just a coincidence. It's the things you choose to do when you're riding. And one of the topics we cover in there is how most accidents are avoidable if you read the situation way before it ever turns into a problem. So with your 2 accidents, what I would say is, if you can figure out why they happened and the series of events that led up to that, if you can then avoid that situation in the future, you know that those things won't happen again. You know, you might have a freak of nature when you're going down the motorway and the lorry coming the other way might jackknife and jump the barrier and come into your lane. But most accidents are avoidable. And if you can see them come in, see the danger signs, you know, keep out of the way of traffic, you know, be on the front foot when you're riding, don't leave your sort of safety in anybody's hands. You know, check out those videos. We talk a lot about that. You know, and if you instill that riding philosophy into your mind, and yeah, carry on riding defensively, carry on riding carefully, you'll find that your confidence slowly builds up. You know, for example, when you're filtering, you know, expect every car door to open in front of you. Expect that every slight gap in the traffic you're filtering, someone's going to jump into. You know, expect everybody to be on the phone and start to weave on the road. You know, you've got to expect all those things and don't trust anyone. You know, I've been doing a lot of miles recently on motorways, and I can't believe how fast some people filter. There'd be no chance at all of people being able to slow down if something happens. So yeah, have a look at those videos, and I think they will help you a lot. But all I can say is I hope that you're starting to get your confidence back now. Touring on a motorcycle, especially with your partner, is one of the best things you can do. And I hope you have a really great trip in Germany. You've got the perfect bike for it. Yeah, just do your best to stay out of trouble. And you know, there's ways around it. Watch that video and enjoy your journeys. But thank you very much. Great question. Really appreciate it. And that's it. That's another Q&A done for this time. Thank you very much for watching. Keep sending in your questions and your comments, and I will see you again soon.